Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of Leading from Alignment. I am your co-host, Jim Wiegand, with my other co-host and founder and president of Converge Coaching. How are you today, John?
Jim, I'm good. My day's better because we've spent a few minutes talking before this.
Always good. It's funny, we talked about really enriching, edifying things like root canals and tooth extractions. It just proves that friendship, right? I mean, friendship makes things better than the lack of friendship. So
that's right.
I'm excited about the episode 78 today because I think this is a difficult question for us to ask because we get close to the people we work with. We have choices, right? Am I their boss? Am I their father? Am I their pastor? In a world where dollars and cents are the only things we measure, it makes a lot of sense. But in a world where we don't just measure dollars and cents, relationships extraordinarily important. So tell us a little bit about the topic today.
So Jim, the topic today is how to handle underperforming staff. And I think maybe one of the most challenging responsibilities of a senior leader is dealing with their team's performance, especially when a member of the team is not performing very well. And in our journeys over the last 8 years with Converge Coaching, I've heard more than once a leader complain to me saying, my staff just doesn't get things done, and then when I dig into that with them and ask, well, what does that mean? They say, well, they miss deadlines. They're doing C grade work. They're trying to delegate things back to me that I gave to them, things like that.
Yeah. There's nothing a pastor loves more than hiring somebody to take responsibility that delegates it back again. Yeah.
Right.
And it's fairly common, right? We're not talking about the rare 5%. I would say that of all the staff that I've had through the years, probably 80%, we've had to have these sorts of conversations. And the other 20%, we had to have the, hey, slow down conversations. So
correct.
So help us with the ones that we need to giddy up a little bit. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so just a little bit of backdrop, since I spent 20 years in the corporate world, I just want to piggyback on what you just said.
Yeah.
I found that having difficult conversations and making tough decisions, personnel decisions, was much easier in the marketplace than it was in the church world. Primarily, Jim, because in the corporate world, these kind of conversations were expected.
Right.
I mean, there was just standard operating procedure. And if somebody got reprimanded or let go, there was little, if any, collateral damage to the organization. As a matter of fact, the opposite usually happened, that the performance level of people picked up because they didn't want to be next. But in the church world, it's more complicated, right? Because we need to have those conversations, but we have to add this pastoral heart to it, right? This pastoral flair. And in the church world, there is significantly more risk for collateral damage.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen that.
Oh yeah. Well, they're underperforming as a pastor, but they're still somebody's pastor. So you're messing with someone who led my child to Jesus, or leads me in worship on Sunday, or did the VBS, or my granddaughter got saved. It's far more personal, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think what happens with a significant number of leaders in the church world is they either go to one or two extremes, Jim. They either stick their head in the sand and pretend that the performance issue or even attitudinal issue, for that matter, doesn't exist.
Right.
And we talk to them about denial not being a good leadership strategy.
Right.
And then we have the opposite end of that spectrum, which is the off with their heads approach, right? That at the littlest transgression, there is just like a writing off of a staff member, or a dismissal of one. And if you do that, if you go to that extreme, you'll never retain staff because you'll get a reputation, right?
Right, sure.
And so using fear and intimidation is a bad leadership strategy too. So I've seen both those extremes. Somewhere in the middle is good leadership,
right?
And handling these kinds of situations, right? So I'd like us to talk about that in 3 ways, Jim. Just 3 key, I think, approaches here. That's one approach with three parts to it, actually, that will help us deal with this difficult problem, I think, better.
Good. All right, take it away.
Okay, so here's the first one. Here's the first thing. When a staff member, a team member is underperforming, the first thing I'd like a leader to do, and I try to do, is to analyze and ask myself this question: what are the real reasons this underperforming teammate is struggling?
Yeah.
And my first step is to self-analyze.
Right.
Does that make
Right.
sense?
You know what? It's funny. It makes perfect sense because whenever a staff member in the situation, by the time I have a conversation, I realize that because I knew it and because I have done it or know how to do it, I assume that they knew what I was talking about when I said it. I assume they had the same capabilities. In other words, my lack of leadership set up my team to fail. It was actually my fault.
Yeah. And so I think that's always a good first step, is to look in the mirror and ask yourself some questions, things like this, like, was I clear with them about the outcomes I wanted? And here's the key to that.
Yeah.
Was it clear to them? Not was it clear in my mind?
Exactly.
Could they tell me, could they repeat back to me what I was asking them to do? So was I clear about the outcomes I wanted? With a larger project, were those outcomes written down?
Right.
Did we agree on a reasonable deadline?
Right. And a reasonable budget and a reasonable, lag time and preparation time and all those things. Yeah.
That's right.
It's funny. Half at the beginning of that project could save all of the stuff we're talking about just to clearly communicate, that goal.
I think so. And then the last kind of self-analysis question is, did I ask them to do something they're not suited for?
Right.
Yeah. And so if the answers to those questions are no, then you're right. I have set that person up to fail, and that's on me. That's my fault. Now, once I kind of work my way through that, the second piece of this analyzing is I turn my attention to the teammate, and I'll ask him or her some of these questions, like, what got in your way with this assignment?
Right.
And Jim, have you ever had that conversation with somebody and then be surprised with what you learned?
As soon as you said that, I can't tell you the number of times, especially, you hire younger staff members, they're newer in their marriage, they're newer in their parenting. And it seems like, I just tell my staff now, if you're getting married, to me, you're probably gonna be useless for about a month before you get married and about a month afterwards. If you have babies, you're useless to me for the first 6 weeks. And then we have that hard transition period where, she wants everybody's gone home. Mom's gone home, mother-in-law's gone home, and it's her and a baby at home alone, their first child. It's overwhelming. Nobody's been sleeping. And I just need you to come home in the middle of the workday. And I'll say, if you work for General Motors, if you work for AT&T, if you work for Bubba's Pie Stand, on the corner, you couldn't just go home in the middle of the day. But not being unkind, just we need to help you, schedule your time better. So I think when there's demands at home, it's really hard for a young couple to balance, and they're going to need our help to balance it through sometimes a corrective conversation.
Yeah, and I've been surprised how often I discover there is something going on that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah.
Maybe they're going through a really difficult time at home. Maybe they're really struggling with organizational ability, and just the ability to focus, or so it could be a lot of things. So I want to ask them to tell me what got in your way. Here's another thing I would ask in the analyze phase to a teammate is, was I clear?
Yeah.
With you?
Right.
And be prepared, right, for them to say no and not take that personally.
Right. And give them permission to, obviously we had a breakdown. So we have failed each other. It isn't just you have failed me. We failed each other. Help me be a better leader. And from that humble position of teach me, I think most people will feel comfortable teaching or talking.
Yeah. And then one last piece to this analysis part is, do you understand why this task or this project is important?
Yeah.
Connecting what I've asked them to do or their work to a bigger picture.
Yeah.
It brings meaning to work.
Right.
And I think I'm a boomer, Jim, and so the older boomers primarily they went to work just because that's what you did. If
Yeah.
there was a sense of duty, there was, hey, it's a transactional
Yeah.
experience, right? I give you time, you give me money. Um, well, as I understand millennials and Gen Z, they don't think about work like boomers do.
Yeah. Yeah.
They want meaning. They want to understand why they're doing what they're doing matters and how it contributes to a bigger picture. And
Yeah.
I think that's part of my responsibility as a senior leader is to
Yeah.
provide that for them.
And what better role to be in than in ministry to have the evidence of that? I can see where if we're building Fords and our goal is to beat Toyota, that may not be as motivational, but someone who loves Jesus, this is to advance the kingdom of our King. I think we really do have a leg up there to really communicate the story of the guy that was mopping the floor when Life magazine came into the Apollo missions and said, we're interviewing everybody to get a man on the moon. And they thought they'd interview this janitor and said, so how's it feel to mop the floors for these great people? He said, I'm not mopping the floors for these great people. I'm doing my part to put a man on the moon.
Yeah.
He had a greater goal, and mopping, giving a clean workplace was an important part of getting a man on the moon. He saw that. So,
and that might agitate a senior leader thinking, why do I have to do that? I'm the boss. Just do what I tell you to do. And again, I mean, I suppose you could take that approach, but I don't think you're going to get the most out of your team over the long
I think too, John, it's tempting from guys our age because the guys that brought us up, that was their attitude.
Correct.
I don't have to explain this to you. I'm your pastor. Do what I tell you to do.
Right.
So there has been a shift, and it's not a bad shift. If as long as our generation understands that they're looking for partnership, well, we're looking for partnership.
Yes.
I'm not looking for an employee. An employee walks past the scrap of paper in the foyer because it's not his job. A partner picks it up because this is his foyer as much as it's mine or anybody else's. So it really is. If we understand this generation, we can help them achieve what their heart needs while they help us achieve the kingdom goals.
Yes, that's right. So before we bring the next step into play, which is corrective measure, and sometimes we bring corrective measures before we analyze, and usually when we do that, we make mistakes.
Yeah.
So it helps to analyze first. So the second thing, Jim, is then to correct.
Yeah.
Helping your staff member, helping that teammate understand what you want and need from them.
Yeah.
And under this corrective phase, here's a few things I'd like us to talk through, Jim. One is giving that staff member a clear explanation of the project and what you want.
Yes. Yeah.
What does a win look like from your perspective?
Right.
And I think depending on the scope of the project, that might need to be in writing. I don't know why we are so adverse, to putting things on paper and signing our name off on something like that. But being clear. Secondly, give them a clear why, as we just talked about a minute ago, right? When I connect the dots between a project and the organizational destination that we are pursuing, it tends to raise the level of performance.
Yes.
Vision has that impact, right? It brings excellence. It brings energy. And the beautiful thing about that is once we start seeing excellence and energy, those things are self-propagating. They beget each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then just one other thing here real quick, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this second thing, is giving the staff member clear boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Spelling out the borders that he or she can operate within in terms of deadlines.
Yeah.
Deadlines is a word that I don't hear a lot of leaders use, but they should.
They should. Every Sunday's a deadline. Yeah.
Well, right. Money spent, value, core values. Here's the parameters, right? I want you to get this done, but I don't want you to step all over people to get this done because that's outside of our values. So that's the second piece, is to bring this loving but firm correction. So what do you think about that one, Jim?
Yeah, I think, back to the communicating and writing, it does take an extra amount of time and care, but I've learned that proactive, what is that? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Mm-hmm.
That if I say, hey, I need you to mow the grass, clean the bathroom, preach a sermon on Sunday. Well, one's obviously far more important than the other ones, but it was on a list of other things that were not as important, but your voice didn't change, your direction didn't change. So when you say, listen, here's the directions for Sunday. These are the things I want you to think about as you prepare a message for the whole congregation, not just for the youth ministry or the children's ministry. These are the things, this is what I want you to wear. This is the stage. I don't want you to go way out. You don't need to do this. It needs to be about this much time. And if you need any help, I'd love to help you because I think you're going to do a great job. So we've set them up to succeed with a list of things. We made sure they knew it was important to us because we gave them, we didn't tell them how to mow the grass or how to clean the bathroom. We told them how to preach a sermon on Sunday, what it means to be a minister of the gospel here on a Sunday morning. So it shows that. And the other thing that I've done for all my staff, the staff come in, I have what's called a user's manual. A user's manual for being with Jim Wiegand as a senior pastor. And the number one thing is I'm quirky and you're going to have to get over it. And it's okay. But the experience of you trying to change me would probably be unpleasant for both of us. So let's just do that. I value time. So never be late. I hate late. If you're late for some reason, I take it as disrespect. I tried not to, but here it is. So I tell them where the landmines are before they just go walking through the field and blow themselves up and wonder why is Pastor Jim always so angry? Well, I'm not. I just need to be specific about what's important about direction. So I've learned exactly what you're saying. And I haven't learned it. I'm 26 years this Sunday, senior pastoring here at Freedom Center. I learned it 2 years ago. I learned it because the staff are now, my sons are on my staff. Hey, Dad, they're close enough to me to say, hey, you're being a jerk. And I'm like, I don't know what you mean by that. You were late. I have a right to be upset. You were late twice in a row. I have a right to be extraordinarily upset. And so we don't know that's important. How could you not know that? You're my, so by the time they communicated to me in a way that I couldn't, it's hard to fire your son, or to even dismiss them, if you will, their thoughts. They've really been proactive in helping me to be a better leader to this generation I'm talking about.
Yeah. And it takes effort to do that. But I'm wondering, I think this is true, that the effort spent up front, being ahead of it, is much less spent than after the fact, right? Where I've got to, now I've got a mess on my hands.
Right.
So
especially if it leads to termination or the staff member quitting. Now it's you've saved what, 10 to 1, 20 to 1, the time, emotional effort, and damage to ministry or fruitfulness of ministry. It is much better to be proactive here than reactive.
Yeah. So before we make personnel decisions, before we look at an underperforming teammate, staff member, and say that guy's got to go, that girl's got to go, we want to analyze. We want to bring correction. And then here's the third thing, and that's eventually decide. We got to make a decision, right? So I think in a lot of cases, if we analyze and correct as we've outlined already, we're going to see improved performance. I've observed that over the course of many, many years, that if I do that well, I seem to get better performance out of a team. And when that happens, I mean, we should throw a party, right? We should celebrate. Let that staff member know, hey, you did such a phenomenal job on that. I appreciate that. Thank you. So when somebody on our team does something exceptionally well, I'm always thanking them and saying, thanks for helping us influence leaders. Because our vision is to influence this big number of leaders by the end of 2025. And I want to tie what they did. And Jim, you've probably been on the receiving end of that at some point. I want to tie that to that big picture for them. So celebrate that. What we celebrate often happens again and happens again and happens again. But here's the really tough part of this conversation. What do you do when the performance continues to be less than stellar after you've taken these measures?
And it's going to happen. This is going to happen, right?
Yes, it is.
One staff member or 100 staff members in the next 10 years, this is going to happen.
It is. And so I always like to think with options, in my mind, Jim. So what are your options? What choices do you have if this is a chronic underperforming situation? Well, option one, we've kind of discussed already, ignore it and hope it goes away on its own. I don't think that's a good idea for a lot of reasons, but one reason you might not be thinking about is you lose leadership credibility with the high performing people on your team if you refuse to deal with underperforming teammates.
Yeah.
Uh,
I heard somebody say it this way. They said, if there's a problem on the staff, my team thinks I don't see it, then I lose credibility as the leader. If there's a problem on my team and they think I do see it and I'm not doing anything about it, I lose more credibility. One, I was not engaged with the dynamics of my team. The other one, I was, but I was either, I didn't care enough, or I was afraid of, or, that's, both of those cost you.
I think it breeds a lack of confidence in the staff.
Yes.
Like, you won't make the tough decisions, you won't make those tough calls. And I think in a way that lessens their confidence in you
Yes.
as a leader. Jim,
Yes.
I have seen this put a lid on the leadership capacity of more leaders than maybe, well, not maybe more than anything else, but it's right up there at the top. That we come to a leadership juncture in our life, and God has many times designed that specifically for our own good, our own growth, and we refuse to make the tough call. We refuse to make a tough decision, and it caps our leadership capacity. So that's one thing you could do, is just ignore it, but it's not advisable.
No.
If their performance continues to be disappointing, that doesn't necessarily mean, this is the second piece, doesn't necessarily mean you have to let them go. You might be able to reassign them, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. We call that a lateral promotion.
That's right. A lateral move. In the business world, that's what we call it. A lateral, it's a lateral move. You know, if they're a good values fit, but they're a square peg in a round hole, reassigning them, if that's possible, could be a good way of handling that. And then here's the really hard piece of this decide, and that is, if you can't reassign them, then you got to help them move on.
Yeah.
And that is one of the hardest things a lead pastor has to do.
Yeah.
You're telling somebody that you've worked together with, prayed together with, sometimes even cried together with,
right,
and you've built something together with, that their time in the organization has come and gone.
Yeah.
It's so difficult.
It's so difficult that I've made it part of the hiring conversation.
Interesting.
So from the very beginning, we make an agreement. At some point in time, you may come to me and say, my season here is done. When you do that, I'll celebrate all that you've done. I'll send you out well as you go out well. You know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. And conversely, because, it's not just one-sided. Everything has to be a win-win.
That's right.
There may come a time where you're no longer the right person to do it, what God needs done with the children, the youth, the music, whatever it is. And when that day comes, you're coming here because we formed some trust for you to come here. I'm asking for the same trust if the day ever comes, it's time to go. Whether I'm the one leaving, you're the one leaving. But so from the very beginning, we don't plant the seed of we're going to fire you someday, but we realize everybody's an interim senior pastor. Everybody's an interim youth pastor. No, other than Jeannie Mayo, nobody's 90 years old still preaching to kids. I'm sorry, Jeannie, if you're out there. I didn't mean 90, but 19-ish, somewhere between 90 to 90. Most youth pastors will be there for a season, a decade or so. Most children's pastors, a season. So I'm not asking for a lifelong commitment that you will have betrayed my trust if you decide not to stay for a lifetime. Right. I assume everybody's coming and going, but me on my staff, every time I hire somebody. So I set up the dynamics that I'm staying until God says I'm finished, and then I'll be done. But I'm staying, realizing most of my staff will not be here when I'm finished.
Yeah. And so there might be leaders listening today, Jim, who are thinking, this seems like a lot of work. and I would say to you two things. Yes, it is. And secondly, whoever said leading was easy? Yeah. It's not easy to lead well. Dealing with performance issues is part of your job as a leader. And if you refuse to grow in that area, like I said earlier, it will put a lid on your leadership. It will be, you are not doing a favor to the chronically underperforming teammate. You're not loving him or her well. That's not loving leadership. I think it's lazy leadership or fearful leadership.
Yes. Yeah.
And you owe it to yourself, to the team, and to the organization you're leading to deal with underperforming staff members, team leaders. Now, some people say, well, I can't do that with a volunteer. Well, why not?
Sure you can. Yeah. And
why
you have
not?
I would say as much or more so with volunteers, because there's going to be 10 volunteers for every staff member. This is this is a part of the organization, not a part of the staff or the volunteer but I get it. It's hard to go to someone and say, you know, that thing you've done for 20 years for free,
Yeah.
we'd be better off if you didn't do that anymore. That's a hard conversation to have, but.
Right. And so look, when I deal with this kind of stuff, I have to tell myself, Jim, everybody ultimately wins. The underperforming person will ultimately win. I will ultimately win. The church will ultimately win. When I postpone those tough moments, everybody in the picture ultimately loses.
Yes. Yeah.
So I want to encourage you guys today that are listening. I hope that this has been practical enough for you to get your arms around. Yeah. But I want to really challenge you too at the same time to step up your game here because the impact it will have on everybody around you long term will be highly beneficial. You'll be a better leader, and the organization you're leading will be able to reach its full potential.
Absolutely. John, thank you. I could not agree more with this. I think there's only one thing more painful than ending a relationship, a ministry relationship, and that's not ending it when it's over with. Not it's harder to not deal with this at some point than it would have been to deal with it.
Right.
We're talking about tooth pain. It's harder to not deal with a cavity than it is to deal with a root canal. So thank you for your time. And as we wrap up today, give us a taste of podcast number 79. Can you believe it's number 79, by the way?
I cannot believe that. We're going to hit 100 this year, and that's pretty exciting.
Crazy.
So in pod 79, I want to talk about the peril of success.
Yeah.
And I'm going to really bring some personal points into that, Jim. When the times when I felt depression and anxiety knocking on my door in the past, every one of those times, Jim, were times of great growth and momentum in my career.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk about why that is and why when you're having a lot of success, danger is lurking, and we want to help you prevent that.
Yeah, great. Well, John, thank you. I know we went a little long on this one, but it was really worthwhile because this is something that really, it hurts, and this helps. So thanks so much. To our listeners and our watchers, God bless you. Thanks for being a part of this with us today. And we hope that there's anything we can do for you, reach out. We are always here, and we always care. And this is what we do here at Converge. So God bless you. Live long, prosper, and we'll see you next time as we continue our conversation, as we continue to lead from alignment.